Hi, and welcome to another installment of I Use Hobbies as a Procrastination Strategy. Today's episode will be making Regency short stays, which were a vital article of clothing for any 1810s ladies, and, important for anybody in the 21st century who wants to spend too much time researching historically accurate pattern strategies to avoid grading assignments. So I've actually had this purple floral jacquard in my fabric collection for a little while now and wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do with it until I saw a tutorial that was posted in a blog 9 years ago on how to make Regency short stays using historically accurate patterning methods. To do so, you needed a few different measurements: the bust, underbust, circumferences, and then the underbust to armpit, underbust to mid-bust, bust separation, and shoulder to shoulder lengths. So it was a fairly complicated amount of different measurements to combine together, but in the end you get a front piece, a back piece, a shoulder strap, and these two little gussets for the bust line. To make a set of stays, you actually need 3 different types of fabric. I have the jacquard, that'll be the outer layer that you see, a lining so that there's like a soft cotton feel against your skin, or whatever clothing you're wearing it on top of, depending on styling, and this really thick, kind of like canvas material that I put on the inside as interfacing. So that meant that every single piece that I was going to use needed to be cut out a left and a right across all 3 types of fabric. Cutting took ages, and definitely took a bit of organization to make sure everything was being cut correctly on the right sides and all that. But finally, you end up with 3 versions of every single piece of the pattern for both sides of your body. Once all the patterns were cut out, it was time to move out to the studio for the assembly. The first part of this process was to attach all of the interfacing layers to all of the outer layers, which meant sewing every single piece of the pattern all the way around on all sides to connect those two, while trying to make sure the interfacing didn't just shred apart because it was being very persnickety. When those pieces were combined, you could essentially just sew the entire set of stays with those 2 thick layers. So I went ahead and started on all of the side seams, combining for both the 2-layered outer section and the lining layer. After that, I transferred the marks for the gussets and made those cuts, which was a bit nerve-wracking because you want to make sure you get them right the first time because there's no going back from there. After that, it was time to actually sew in the gussets. Again, a bit terrifying. Kind of a difficult cut to try and sew when your fabric is so thick now, but I got them all in on both the outer layer and the lining for all 4 gussets. It just took some time and a tiny bit of seam ripping to make it all look nice and clean. That basically left us with 2 complete shells of stays that then needed to be matched up with the seam sides facing each other so that the outside of both materials was clean with no exposed edges. I was ironing in the process to make sure that all stayed flat, and then it was time to sew those. So I just started on one side and worked my way all the way around with a straight stitch, connecting the lining to the interfacing outer layer. And that had to be done to both the left and the right side of the corset. If I had been smart, I would have put the straps in by now, but I did completely forget about them, so I ended up adding the straps a little bit later after they were all the way sewn together on all sides. That meant that there was 1 single exposed seam in the entire project, which was a little bit frustrating, but the straps are there and that's what matters in the end.
That was a lot of progress for one night that I wasn't actually planning on being out here at all. But we now have both the right and the left sides of the short stays complete. They're lined, nice, no exposed seams. It's always fun. So tomorrow I will sew the boning channels and boning into these. I don't know what I'm going to use for the binding yet, so that might be all the progress we can make. I don't know, we'll see. Good night.
And we're back into voiceover mode for the next morning. I went back to that cluster frock website to double check the patterning angles for all of the boning channels, But after that, it was just a matter of getting them lined up in the right position and then sewing straight stitches that left you with like about a 1/2 inch of separation between each stitch line. Each iteration of the stay or corset historically had slightly different methods for boning, but ultimately they were meant to best flatter the body and secure the garment. After that, it was time to cut out all of those individual pieces of boning and stuff them into their channels, which takes longer than you'd think it would, given that it's just cutting. But as soon as they were all in, it was time to do a sort of fit test. This was a struggle bus, trying to figure out how to get 2 different things to stay on your body simultaneously, while not like stabbing yourself with pins. But with the confirmation that it was all fitting okay, I moved on to the binding step, which, let me tell you, it's not my favorite part of the process. You have to take so much ribbon, and I have my own bias tape maker, but it means that you iron it once flat, dragging this little bias tape across the ribbon, and then you have to iron it all again to get it to actually fold in half. But actually sewing it on is quite easy. You just sew one side, and then you flip all of that ribbon inside out, and sew on the other side. Naturally, though, you have to do this all the way around for both the left and the right half of the corset, so it took a little while and wasn't without any mess-ups, but in the end, it gives you a really clean look and makes it so you don't have to deal with like flipping things, so bias tape is helpful. After that, it was time to start poking the holes so that you could actually lace this together and make it a real garment instead of just 2 random flaps of fabric, as one does. Essentially, I take this metal awl and jab a hole and then make it a little bit bigger so that it can fit an eyelet. You can also use grommets for this, but I didn't like the colors of my grommets, so I ended up with just single-piece eyelets rather than the 2-piece grommet.
I finished putting on the eyelets in, and unfortunately, on the try-on, it became glaringly obvious that I made this for a different sized human. So I am going to probably cut off like at least 1.5 inch wide triangle on either side, because you can't go for the front or the back because that's where all the eyelets are already. So I'll just chop off this shape and resew it, resew the boning channels, all that fun stuff. And I'll check back with you when this actually fits.
So after a little bit of unforeseen editing, it was time for the final reveal.
So that was my brief sojourn into Regency short stays, which will probably turn into a prolonged vacation there because I would like one in every color and pattern option. But in the meantime, if you're interested in seeing more content like this, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Coming up on deck, once I get through 6 hours of footage to edit, I will be recreating some pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood paintings by sewing the clothing and then using self-portraiture photography to like make myself look like I'm in the painting. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So stick around, I'll see you in the next video.